So Kamala Harris released a statement. Yesterday at Union Station in Washington, D.C., we saw despicable acts by unpatriotic protesters and dangerous hate-fueled rhetoric. I condemn any individuals associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent, and we must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. That flag is a symbol of our highest ideals nation and represents the promise of America. It should never be desecrated in that way. I support the right to peacefully protest, but let's be clear, anti-Semitism, hate, and violence have no place in our nation. Obviously, Kamala Harris didn't have to put out a statement condemning the peaceful protests the day before, did she? The one that got largely positive press coverage? That's crazy. It's almost like disciplined protesting has better outcomes than just letting a bunch of dumb fucks in their early 20s run around and express their Twitter grievances. Dude, I'm telling you, if Twitter was around back in the civil rights days, you know there would have been video footage of like the cops beating and arresting civil rights protesters, and a bunch of people on Twitter would have been like, you know, you can fight them back, right? Dude, these cucks are just letting themselves get arrested. Like, why aren't they fighting back? And it all would have been over. And there would still be slavery today. They would have brought it back after those protests. They would have been like, you know, a bunch of civil rights movement Twitter edition. And it's like a bunch of white people showing up at the civil rights protests, start fighting with the cops. Then the black people get arrested anyway, you know? Then they bring back slavery. That's what Twitter wants. I know what leads to good outcomes: fighting the police. There's no historical evidence to suggest that always leads to bad outcomes. You know, MLK was criticized for allowing children protesters to get brutalized by the police at the time, right? Yeah, but that was because the children protesters were up there at all. They weren't recommending that they should have, like, fought the police. Like, the problem there was that the children were in a position to be menaced by the police, not that the response was that a bunch of black men should have gotten into a fist fight with the white cops to protect those kids, which would have led to, I promise you, much worse outcomes. Promise you that wouldn't have gone well, folks. That wouldn't have gone well. That wouldn't have been a good one. It was a PR move. People were appalled. Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes protesting is just getting your teeth kicked in by the cops and letting people be horrified by it. I don't think chat realized how organized and militant activists used to be in the US. In the 90s, the FBI had to enact Green Scare to destroy the eco movements and arrest thousands of people. Many are still in prison. Yeah, the FBI loves it when lefty protest movements are entirely decentralized and entirely dictated through Twitter rhetoric. You know, they love that shit. No organization, no message discipline. It's easy to focus on the worst actors in every instance. They love that shit. They hate it when it's stuff like Jewish Voice for Peace, because they actually act in a disciplined fashion, don't fight back against the cops. They bring plenty of people with cameras to record the bad behavior of the police if it takes place. They hate that. They hate that shit. The FBI hates that shit. And so do Twitter leftists, because it looks cucked. It's so liberal, a bunch of people getting peacefully arrested for protesting genocide. You know, it would be much more based and red-pilled, forcing the potential president of the United States to distance herself from your protest because your optics were so bad. Well done, as always. Anyway, all is not lost. Jesus Christ, this is slop. Wow, protesting being performative. Vosh like 3 times in the last year. It is performative. It has to be performative for the right group of people. Protesting should be performative for the masses in general. Otherwise, what are you doing a protest for? Weak and dumb, Jesus Christ, this is slop. That's okay. I'll keep you around. You stand to learn something from this content. Anyway, all is not lost. I genuinely do think that Kamala Harris is going to be better about Israel than Biden, in spite of all this. I saw a lot of people reacting to this statement with vitriol, as though Kamala Harris had any choice considering the circumstances. But following this, Kamala Harris had a private meeting with Harris and was reportedly, Netanyahu had a private meeting with Kamala Harris and was reportedly upset with both the things she said in private and the things she said in public afterwards. So they had a private meeting. Afterwards, Kamala Harris spoke with reporters and described the contents of the meeting, talking about civilian deaths in Gaza and the, quote, dire humanitarian situation there, something she talked about to the extent that it reportedly upset Netanyahu. Apparently, I mean, she got his goat a little bit because he was sulking afterwards. And then she had a public speech. Now, I ask you something. Is it not meaningful that on the same day she was forced to condemn the admittedly optically bad protests at Union Station in D.C., she put out a statement condemning those protests? She put out a press release, a video, a speech to make these comments.
We have to go to Vice President Kamala Harris, who's speaking now after her meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. From when I was a young girl collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters.
Oh God, this is bad. Hold your horses. This is something literally anybody would have to say. Do you think Kamala Harris is going to come out here and say Israel doesn't have a right to exist, Hamas is correct? Temper your expectations a little bit, okay? And be patient.
Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. On October 7, Hamas triggered this war when it massacred 1,200 innocent people, including 44 Americans. Hamas has committed horrific acts of sexual violence and took 250 hostages. There are American citizens who remain captive in Gaza. Sagi Deko Hen, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, Idan Alexander, Keith Siegel, Omer Nutra, and the remains of American citizens Judy Weinstein, Gad Haggai, and Itai Hen are still being held in Gaza. I have met with the families of these American hostages multiple times now, and I've told them each time they are not alone, and I stand with them. And President Biden and I are working every day to bring them home. I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies.
This is already more than Biden has ever said. And I mean that too, in terms of like the strength of the language and how evocative the description of the humanitarian situation is. This is already more significant than anything he said. She got the beginning bit out of the way, which you might note, by the way, the beginning preamble was focused primarily, at least after the initial obvious bit of we condemn Hamas, we support Israel, focused on the hostages. Keep in mind the Biden administration is currently trying to, well, ineffectively, but still nonetheless pressuring Netanyahu's war cabinet into accepting the ceasefire and hostage exchange deal that Biden was pressuring really hard pressing really hard for a month ago. And now we're talking explicitly about the humanitarian concerns. What matters to me, this speech doesn't go on to, like, this is like a pithy little statement. This is a public address immediately after the meeting with Netanyahu. Hey, quick question. Did Biden give a public address about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza after speaking privately with Netanyahu, something he did the exact same day? No. This is what I mean, guys. The problem is, like, everyone's, they're conditioned by Twitter. It's like, okay, well, I won't support a presidential candidate who does anything less than revere Hamas for their, you know, their intifada against Israel. And it's like, okay, once we dial down the expectations just a little bit, once we, like, bring it back just a little bit, if we could, I think that the behavior here signals a very, very clear difference in the level of commitment and the priorities. Remember when Biden went out there and made a public speech condemning the student protesters, essentially aligning with Republicans and indicating that they were like traitors and anti-Semitic and what have you? Even in the statement that she made right here, she didn't make any generalized statements about the protesters. She said, I condemn any individuals associating with Hamas, Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent. I condemn the burning of the American flag. She did not say this protest was anti-Semitic, these protesters were anti-Semitic, or anything to that effect. That seems like kind of a subtle distinction, but it's a very meaningful one. It's tailored language that is meant to avoid a categorical opposition to the protest. And she never condemned, of course, the Jewish Voices for Peace protest the other day, so I'm telling you, folks, if you read between the lines here, I don't even think it's reading between the lines. I think it's just reading the lines. No, Jews, or Biden spoke on the student protests and spoke generally. For one, Biden lied about the student protests. There weren't anti-Semitic incidents happening there in any meaningful sense. Like obviously, if you get enough people doing anything in any public setting, bad things are going to happen. But like, he wasn't talking about any specific instance. He was emboldening and repeating dishonest talking points that generalize the state of the protest broadly. There is a meaningful distinction here.
We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
Hey.
Thanks to the leadership of our President, Joe Biden, there is a deal on the table for a ceasefire and a hostage deal. And it is important that we recall what the deal involves. The first phase of the deal would bring about a full ceasefire, including a withdrawal of the Israeli military from population centers in Gaza. In the second phase, the Israeli military would withdraw from Gaza entirely, and it would lead to a permanent end to the hostilities. It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends.
That right there, particularly strong language to me. Keep in mind that she's saying all of this right after Netanyahu addressed Congress and said, no, we don't want this to end until we're ready to end it. Give us more weapons so we can kill more Palestinians. We'll decide when it's over.
And the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination.
Self-determination for the Palestinian people. Do I detect a hint of perhaps strong language?
There has been hopeful movement in the talks to secure an agreement on this deal. And as I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is time to get this deal done. So to everyone who has been calling for a ceasefire, and to everyone who yearns for peace, I see you and I hear you.
I know that line. Let's
get the deal done so we can get a ceasefire to end the war. Let's bring the hostages home, and let's provide much-needed relief to the Palestinian people. And ultimately, I remain committed to a path forward that can lead to a two-state solution. And I know right now it is hard to conceive of that prospect, but a two-state solution is the only path that ensures Israel remains a secure Jewish and democratic state, and one that ensures Palestinians can finally realize the freedom, security, and prosperity that they rightly deserve. And I will close with this then. It is important for the American people to remember the war in Gaza is not a binary issue. However, too often the conversation is binary, when the reality is anything but. So I ask my fellow Americans to help encourage efforts to acknowledge the complexity, the nuance, and the history of the region. Let us all condemn terrorism and violence. Let us all do what we can to prevent the suffering of innocent civilians. And let us condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia.
That's also a big one. Everyone says condemn anti-Semitism here, condemn anti-Semitism there. And I agree, by the way. How often has Islamophobia come up in this context?
And hate of any kind. And let us work to unite our country. I thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, again, I'm not, I understand that from some people's perspectives, it might be like, oh, he's trying to sugarcoat this. I'm not saying Kamala Harris is like some crazy ultra woke going to solve all the problems, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying the evidence clearly suggests she is better than Biden on this issue. By the way, this is her language now while she's running, not even after getting it. Like, generally speaking, language is a lot more cautious when you're running than it is after you're like, depending on the issue, you know, with this issue specifically, everyone's been so afraid to speak out unless you're already kind of in that caucus, like Rashida Tlaib or whatever. The fact that she's willing to commit to these stronger positions before even the Democratic convention, to me, it's a positive one. Still just words? Well, yeah, she's only the VP. She's not president, you know. Again, we're judging based on words right now. Words are all we have. If you want actions, then you can go back. There are plenty of reports, contemporary and past, that talk about how Zionist Biden is and Kamala being not so much. So you can look into that if you want. And we have looked into that on the stream. I'm only saying it's nice. It's nice that she's willing to bring up Islamophobia. It's nice that she's willing to say, do not become numb to the suffering. It's nice that she's willing to criticize Netanyahu, not directly, because she's shrewd, but effectively criticize Netanyahu immediately after meeting with him privately, whereas Biden wouldn't. It's nice that when she criticized the optically disastrous DC Union Station protest, she did so in a non-essentialist way and didn't deride the protests broadly, but only specific actions at the protest. It's nice, it's nice, it's nice, it's nice, it's nice. And by the way, you know, in addition to Netanyahu reportedly being upset after his meeting, which good, I really, really, really like the subtitle on this Fox News article. Reports say Netanyahu is worried that what Harris said publicly could threaten a hostage and ceasefire deal. But then when you read into it, what you actually realize it means is could threaten to implement a hostage ceasefire deal. Listen. The official added that, in their view, Netanyahu was irked with Harris speaking about a hostage and ceasefire deal as a way to end the war outright when Israel wants to be able to resume fighting after one is implemented. So the tagline here, which implies Harris is jeopardizing the potential for a hostage and ceasefire deal, actually means Harris is threatening to enable a hostage and ceasefire deal, which he doesn't want, because he wants a forever war. Yeah, she's threatening us with peace, exactly. Two Israeli officials say Netanyahu's meeting with Biden was much more constructive than his meeting with Harris. What do you think constructive means to Hitlerite Israeli officials? You know, what do you think that means to them? The Israeli officials and Netanyahu and his team were caught off guard by Harris's on-camera statement and taken aback by its tone, which they said sounded much more critical than Biden's. Next, Netanyahu meets with Trump. Oh, that would have already happened. That was Friday morning, so that would have been a few hours ago. Anyway, I think I've made the point here. Again, I don't want to come at this saying like Kamala Harris is like a super ultra lefty, you know, powerhouse of a candidate who's going to instantly, you know, lead a joint force of Hamas, Houthi, and Hezbollah forces to bring down Israel or whatever the I'm just saying that she's better, man. She's better. She's a lot better. Oh, yeah. Also, the fact that she wants to replace Anthony Blinken as Secretary of State is a pretty significant jump as well. Like, she wants to replace a good bit of Biden's cabinet. That's also substantial, by the way. The fact that she wants to replace Biden's cabinet, or a significant portion of it, that's a pretty huge one. Thank you, Holic Master, for reminding me. Secretaries of State, Defense, and more. Afuera! Blinken is a jackass? Yeah, he is. Kim. Philip Gordon, perhaps. I envision a beautiful future, okay? America takes the coconut pill. We get a two-state solution, somehow. And Gaza ends up becoming a world-class destination as a kind of like de facto city-state, okay? We're talking Singapore, but you're allowed to chew gum, folks. It's going to be beautiful, okay? GDP per capita of 103,000 USD. A beautiful, beautiful resort, you know. They're going to rebuild all those mosques and churches that were broken down. It's going to be great. They're going to build, there's going to be a beautiful wall, folks. There's going to be a beautiful wall. A wall much like a wall that we've seen before, but this one's going to be built by the Palestinians. They're going to keep the Israelis out. The Israelis are going to be mad. They're going to be throwing rocks across it. They're going to say, let us in. And the Palestinians are going to say no. The new Monaco, but better. Yeah. Israel has an iron dome. Gaza builds a gold dome. And Israel's going to pay for it. Goddamn right. Which means in practice, we're going to pay for it. You know. We should unironically pay for it, though. There is quite possibly no limit morally speaking, to the amount that we owe the Palestinian people for our role in their genocide. We're talking reparations, the likes of which the world has never seen, folks. Just get, like, you know, give them the same military deal we've been cutting Israel, you know? Just let the Palestinians manage their own defense. They've got like modern Abrams rolling down the streets of Gaza City. How would you go about building a wall around the West Bank? We're going to build a beautiful tunnel, underground highway between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Okay, just a big. It's going to be like the the English Channel. All right, we're going to build a big highway, a hyperloop. We're going to build a beautiful hyperloop. Alternatively, we make it an above ground highway. We just cut Israel in two. That'll make them mad. We do to Israel what highways did to Los Angeles. All right, we're going to cut you the f up.